The cookout logic. The cookout logic basically states that certain groups of people can't be held accountable for bad behavior because of social justice reasons. Now, this season, it was primarily focused on the so called black house guests of this season of Big Brother, but generally, they also mean that women can't be sexist and people of the alphabet gang can't be bigoted or bad people. But this season, it was about how black people can't be racist. And this resulted in horrible consequences inside the house. And this mentality results in horrible consequences outside of the CBS reality TV show game. For example, cookout logic enables missing black women and murder rates increasing. It encourages that to get ignored because you would have to highlight black on black crime, which is racist according to cookout members and fans. Cookout logic also enables a woman getting raped on a train while people watch and record it because you getting publicly raped on a train in a liberal city while an illegal immigrant that's of African descent rapes you, well, you can't check that person because, they so called black. And it would be racist to apprehend that person. So that was probably the mentality around why people watched the woman get raped and recorded it, by the way. And if you're an activist that helps out the community, that doesn't matter. You can still get murdered in a home invasion. And cookout logic says you can't describe the criminals who did it because using their race as part of their description, well, that's racist. You can only highlight when the murderer is so called white. And this murdered activist supported education equity and founded an Oakland and New York based nonprofit organization called Great School Choices. School choice, by the way, is viewed by the woke as alt right and racist. Somehow, but that's how they think. But what they don't find racist is Oregon lowering education standards for minority students. That's right, the governor of Oregon signed a new law removing education standards, which means students can now graduate high school without being able to read or do math. And Oregon is not alone. Las Vegas, through their schools in Nevada, will no longer dock a student's grade for missing class, missing assignments, or failing to participate in class. And in Colorado, they have changed its grading scale so that a score of 52% or higher is a passing grade. In Minnesota schools, they have removed F grades to fight systematic racism. Remember, folks, school choice is alt right and racist, but all this shit that I just listed is not. In fact, it fights racism. And this is all cookout logic bullshit. Because the basis of all of this is the core belief that things like the cookout can't be racist. And when you say stupid shit like that, you're negating all bad behavior because racism is bad behavior. And if bad behavior goes ignored, then things like murder, home invasion, robbery, and poor academics get ignored. And poor academics, poor students Well, they generally don't become model citizens for the most part. Which brings me back to the initial point of that whole Tiffany is missing scheme that occurred during the America's Favorite Player voting, where you had her so called fans engaging in the mockery of murdered and missing black women by employing this Tiffany is missing as a strategy. Again, mocked from the same people who claim to love black women all throughout the Big Brother season and all year round. Yet those same people are willing to make light of real situations in an effort to get what they want out of a televised game. That's cookout logic. And this bad behavior wasn't called out by most people due to cookout logic. Because we saw the avatars, we saw the faces who were involved in this Tiffany is missing as a joke. And according to woke Big Brother fans, you can't call that behavior out because, what the people look like and what they have in their Twitter bios. Their Twitter bios including, BLM and rainbow flags and gender pronouns and all the other bullshit, which signals to you what type of person you're dealing with. But again, the whole cookout can't be racist applies not only to the cookout members, but it applies to their fans as well, which enables them to engage in a lot of the racist behavior that they engage in. And this logic doesn't just have bad consequences in the televised game, but as I've highlighted, it has deadly consequences in real life. Because according to the FBI, the increase in murders of black women comes as the overall U.S. murder rate rose nearly 30% during the pandemic, the biggest jump in 6 decades. Most of America's homicide victims remain men, and black men and boys continue to face the highest overall risk of homicide. And the rising murder rate has affected black women across the country. Baltimore, Maryland recorded the highest number of women killed in 2020, with at least 48 women murdered throughout the year, many of them black. But what does a black feminist legal scholar bitch blame? Well, they blame the access to firearms, not the households. They blame the barriers to access of preventative measures or preventative services, not fatherless households. And they blame mental health care, not culture. Don't blame any of the significant things that make you look into the mirror. Why? Because they abide by the cookout can't be racist logic. And so all of the real resolutions will continue to get ignored while standards continue to get lowered and crime increases as a result. And as I stated before, you have the woke white libtards, the non-black members of the cookout who suffer the consequences as well from this logic, from carjackings to even mass shootings that get ignored by the mainstream because the shooter doesn't fit the bill. Hell, you even had a recent New York Times article ask the question, was I right to call the cops on a black man breaking into a car? That's fucking peak cookout logic. And we have a generation of people being raised with that mentality that they can't be blamed for shit. They can't be blamed for shit. And so they go out and do a bunch of unruly shit as a result. Because where that Big Brother game is based in California, they have enabled so much stealing that they're losing business. They're losing business. Businesses, surprisingly enough, are deciding to leave that area. So now the area is just being left by business and filled with more crime and shit on the streets. And you had a man like Larry Elder that wanted to solve that situation, but instead of encouraging that and allowing him to do that, they chose to reelect or reinstate the liberal white man over the conservative black man, because the conservative black man is a white supremacist, according to them, because he actually wants to solve problems. And that whole education issue and the lowering of standards, it's pretty pathetic because you have people who come from other countries like Bangladesh. They can't speak the language. They come from more extreme poverty than Americans can ever imagine. And yet, when they come over here, they excel. They excel because they actually, despite, struggling through poverty, they still have an established culture and family oriented mindset, which enables them to form things like tutoring farms, where they work on their schooling after school during the weekends. And this is how they excel better, not just better than black children in America, but children in general in America. And a large part of that is due to them still pushing family and still pushing culture. Things which have been deemed as whiteness, which is a bad thing. Oh, man. But yeah, it's quite humorous. The one person, well, I'm one among a few others, but I'm the main one who isn't a fan of any of the Cookout members, especially someone like Tiffany. But yet, it takes someone like me to call out, even after the season, to call out how disturbing that whole Tiffany is missing scheme actually was, and highlight what it was truly making a mockery out of. But, it's plain and simple. These people are just fucking idiots.